This is Lorenzo, and this is the Training Space Taxonomy video series, lesson number 2. It's on equipment spaces. It's a framework designed to help you make the most of the training equipment and the spaces that you already have. Starting with stationary zones, every gym, commercial or home, will have certain fixed zones sectioned off for certain dedicated types of training. We will discuss 4 such zones and also 4 types of equipment that will go into those zones. One of those zones actually is also an open floor. Most people don't prioritize an open floor space where they can really have the freedom to practice certain bodyweight skills. And that's a mistake. We definitely need an open wall and an open floor space. And finally, stored accessories are all these small supportive pieces of equipment that makes our lives a lot easier in terms of doing both open floor and fixed stationary zone types of exercises. Let's take a look. Okay, so taking a closer look at our first equipment space domain, we have stationary or fixed zones, which can be defined in the following way. These are exercises best practiced in a fixed zone with secure stationary equipment. There are 4 zones. We're going to have an open floor wall zone, a stall bar zone, a ring zone, and a door frame zone. Every zone needs its own equipment that will be also fixed or stationary. A mat and stall bar will go in the stall bar zone, a pair of rings in the ring zone, and a frame bar in the door frame zone. Start by identifying an open space in your home that has an open wall and open space that is at least 3 cubic meters in size. So for example, your ceiling height needs to be at least 3 meters high. The width will be 3 meters and the length will be 3 meters. You'll then half the space. So this will be your open wall and open floor space. And to the right of it will be your stall bar zone, which we'll see in a second, with a mat. Your floor wall zone will be on this side. And then your stall bar zone will be on the right-hand side. Your stall bar zone will have a mat and, of course, stall bars against the wall. You can see I've got my desk in my open space area. So it's a trade-off I had to make because my place is very small. I have to now have a different open floor and wall space. In fact, my open floor space is going to be right here, and I've got my wall space in the hall, as you'll see in a second. As for our ring zone, ideally what you want to do is, if this is your open wall and floor space, and this is your stall bar space, you want your rings to be suspended, maybe in your open floor space. But because my open floor space is in front of my mat, what I would have liked to have done is have my ring suspended from the ceiling right in front of my mat. But because that also wasn't possible, I had to suspend my rings from the stall bar, as you can see it there. But because I still can't do, for example, ring dips or back levers on this setup, it's still useful to have a dedicated ring zone somewhere. So what I would have to do, for example, is do some of my ring work here and then sometimes go to the gym to do my remaining ring work. Moving on to our 4th and final zone, we have our door frame zone, as we can see over here, which requires a door frame puller bar. What you want to do is locate the closest door frame to your office or where you will see it the most so that you can actually use it. So in summary, we have our open floor wall zone, our stall bar zone, our ring zone here as well as here, and finally our door frame zone. Moving on to our second equipment space domain, we have our open floor space, which is also a fixed zone. It can be defined in the following way. These are exercises best practiced in an open training zone with mobile floor stored equipment. In terms of our floor stored equipment, which will also be stored in our open training zone because it's easy to move around, and that's probably where we will use it, is our box, our parallettes, our dowel, and as you'll see, our parallel bars. For example, here is my open training space, and there is my box, my parallettes, my dowels. And because my open floor space doesn't have an open wall next to it, which I highly recommend, it's far more convenient, I had to make a plan by using my cupboard space in my hallway as my open or free wall for my open wall exercises. But the whole point is to ensure that you have enough floor space in your open training zone to neatly pack away or store your floor stored equipment, as you see me doing it here. I've got mine directly underneath the kitchen island, which I will move out, do my exercises, and then move back in. Another example would be with the parallel bars. where you would have it stored in the corner somewhere, move it into your open floor space, do your exercises, and then move it back. So in summary, your open floor domain is an open floor and open wall space that also has enough space for certain floor stored equipment items, such as your box, parallettes, dowel, and your parallel bars. Moving on to our third and final equipment space domain, we have our stored accessories, which can be defined in the following way. Think of the exercises that are best practiced in an open training zone or a fixed training zone with equipment that is mobile as well as supportive, like our blocks, bands, our dowel, and our pads. Now, when I talk about stored accessory equipment, I'm really only referring to 4 pieces of equipment: your blocks, bands, your dowel, and your knee pad. As you can see it over here, there's the knee pad, I've got my blocks, and I've got my dowels. But you can either store it with your floor stored equipment, as I have here, but also you could store like your bands away if you don't want it hanging around, like I have here in a drawer. But regardless of where you store it, you can see our accessory equipment can be used in open as well as fixed zones. Like here with blocks, you're going to use in an open training zone. But this I would consider a fixed training zone. That's part of my store bars. Here we have a fixed training zone. Again, my store bars with my mat, where I'll use my bands. So that would be a fixed training zone. Next, the butcher's block stretch is a good example of a dowel used in a open and a fixed training zone. So this would be my fixed zone. My mat always stays there. By the way, this is so important if I haven't mentioned it before, but your mat should never be rolled away, because if your mat is part of the furniture, so to speak, you will use it more, like I do. I'm constantly moving from my desk to the mat to do certain stretches or movements. Finally, for our last example, we have a knee pad that I use in an open training zone. Because this mat here, it's fixed, it's very heavy, I like to have a small mat like this that I can easily move around, and which I do in my open training space, as you see me doing the head hover in my open floor and open wall space area. So in summary, there are 3 equipment space domains that we have to keep in mind when designing our own home gym, starting with our stationary zones. We have 4 zones times 4 pieces of equipment. For our open floor, we need an open wall as well as an open floor with enough floor space for our parallel bars, our box, and our parallettes. And finally, for our last equipment space domain, we have stored accessories. These are the supportive mobile pieces of equipment like our blocks, bands, dowel, and our pads that we will use in an open as well as our fixed training zones.